Hilchos Parah Adumah Perek Chamishi. The laws of the red cow, chapter 5. Baruch Hashem, we're back on Sunday morning. It's noisy in shul. People are learning Torah. It's good to hear the Kol Torah, the voice of Torah. So the mic sometimes picks up a little bit of the outside noise, but that's fine. We're learning. Today we're learning something that is mainly related to the Parah Adumah, but really it's a principle that applies across many areas of purity and impurity. And I think since it's the first time that it comes up, that the Rambam therefore goes into much more detail, even though it kind of goes off track of the Parah Adumah, because it's general rules that relate to the whole of the book of Tahara. So the Rambam has to elaborate now, so later on he can skip without elaborating, just say, as we explained over here. And what is this rule? This rule is called kibus begadim. Kibus begadim means laundering of the clothes, washing of the clothes, but it's the Torah's way of saying that if you become impure in a certain level, everything that you're touching, the clothes that you're wearing, and any utensils that you're going to touch while you're doing this act is going to become impure. Torah is full of this expression, yechabes begadav, v'chibes begadav. He launders his clothes. It means you become in a state of impurity which forces everything that you're touching directly to become impure. And that's going to be today's topic. Says the Rambam halacha aleph, kol ha'oiskin b'parah mitchila v'ad soif. Anybody who is involved with the Parah Adumah, from the beginning to the end, beginning meaning the shechita, the slaughtering, to the end meaning the gathering of the ashes. Like we had in chapter 3. They would slaughter it, they would burn it, they would throw in the stuff to the fire. Once it became ash, they would hit it with sticks to get all the ash, to pound it all together, and they would collect the ash, and then they would divide it. But here the Rambam is talking about till the collecting. Mitamin begadim kol zman asiyasa. They transmit impurity to their clothing as long as they're doing the acts. Shenemar, because it says in the pasuk, b'sheichet umashlich eitz eres, about the Kohen who does the slaughtering and throws in the cedar wood. It says v'chibes begadav v'rachatz besarei. See, v'chibes begadav hakohen. Right? The Kohen needs to wash his clothing and wash his flesh. That's about the person who's slaughtering and throwing the stuff. Then it says, v'nemar basoyref, the person who burns the cow, says also, v'hasoyref oisa yechabes begadav. The person who burns it needs to wash his clothing. V'nemar, and then the next verse, person who's gathering the ashes, it says again, v'chibes ha'oisef as efer ha'parah, the person who gathers the ash of the cow also has to wash his clothes. 3 stages: slaughtering, throwing, burning. Melamed, this teaches us, anybody who's involved in it from the beginning to the end, mitamin begadim, makes all of his clothing impure, utu'unin tvila v'harav shemesh, and he himself has to go to the mikveh and wait till sunset, din Torah. That's the biblical law. Aval hameshamra b'shas asiyasa, somebody who's just watching it, because they used to have also supervisors. You see over here, people from the Sanhedrin, people were standing around just to make sure nothing could go wrong. Like we saw yesterday, if some bones or flesh popped out of the fire, what do? They were always standing guard. Those people, mitame begadim midivreim, they're only transmitting impurity to the clothing rabbinically. Gzeir Hashem ba'yaziz ba'ever, because they might move something, and if you actually move the Parah Adumah, then of course you become impure. So as a fence, they said, you're always going to make you impure rabbinically. Now this implies, the commentaries say, touching it doesn't make you impure. Yaziz means to move. Once you actually move, then you become impure. Halacha beis. Now let's expand this to all impurities. Kol makom shenemar b'Torah betumais. Any place, when it comes to impurity, if Torah uses the word yechabes begadav, you wash your clothing. So seemingly it means just the clothing, yeah? Loi bala lamdeinu. Shahabegadim she'alav bilvadhim tmeim. This is not just telling us that the actual clothing which he's wearing are impure. Ela lilamed, rather it means to say shekol beged oikli sheyiga b'hatame hazeh, that any clothing, any utensil which this impure person will touch b'shas chibure b'metamav, while he's actually touching the source of impurity, harehin tmeim, they're going to be impure. So for example, he'll give an example in a second, but I'll just show you on the picture. This is an avela, a kosher dead animal. While he's touching that kosher dead animal, anything else that he touches becomes impure. But after he removes his hand or his body from touching the source of impurity, he no longer makes his clothing impure. Ketzad, what does this look like? Somebody's carrying a dead body of an animal. So all the clothes that he's wearing, and any utensil which he touches, as long as he's carrying the dead body of the animal, the carcass, they become impure. And they become what's called first degree. Av Tuma is a source of impurity. That's the nevela. The nevela is an Av Tuma. He became a Rishon Latuma. Right? The person carrying is also a first degree. But that's all while he's touching the nevela. If he removes himself from the source of impurity. He threw away the dead carcass. He remains first degree impure. But because he's only first degree, if he'll touch now a utensil or clothing, he won't make it impure. Because a child level tuma, not a father, source of impurity, anything that's lower degrees, cannot transmit impurity to other utensils, as we explained in the beginning of this book, also chapter 5 of the previous set of laws. Anything like a nevela, which is a source of impurity, same rules apply. Okay, now going back to the Parah Adumah, taking this rule, so same thing when we say that anybody who's involved in the Parah Adumah makes clothing impure, doesn't just mean his own clothing, it means if he touches any other clothing or utensil while he's slaughtering or burning, while he's doing the act, they're impure. But after he removes himself from the actions, even though he himself is still impure, so to speak, he hasn't gone to the mikveh, touching a utensil won't make him impure, because he's a child level of impurity, first degree, not a father. The Parah Atzma, it's not the cow itself, pay attention. It's not the Parah Adumah itself. It will not transmit impurity to people or utensils which touched it. This is one of the parts of Parah Adumah hard to understand. The person who's dealing with it, he becomes impure. He's the one that needs mikvah, v'to and tvila. And he'll transmit impurity to clothing as long as he's dealing with it. But the cow itself, let's say I'm the kohen, I'm not a kohen, let's say I'm the kohen burning it, yeah? And you walk over to the Parah Adumah and touch it. Nothing happens to you. You touch me, while I'm doing the Parah Adumah, you become impure. It's a fascinating concept. Halacha Gimel says that Rambam b'mei dvarim amurim, when does this whole law apply to the Parah Adumah? Bizman shenisrefes k'mitzvasa, if it's being burnt in the proper way. And like I said yesterday, 2 days ago, lots of conditions have to be met to do the proper way. Avalim nifsala, if at any point it becomes disqualified, hamisasik b'tahar, anybody that's dealing with it is actually pure. What if it started off good and then became bad in the middle of the process? So the Rambam says, Eira psul b'shchitasa, if a disqualification happened in its slaughtering. What kind of disqualification? Commentaries argue. Either it was a bad shchita, literally like it became a nevela, the shchita was disqualified, or he was doing other side work. Yesterday we learned that you can't do side work while you're engaged in the Parah Adumah, or maybe you had the wrong intent. You slaughtered it shalei lishma, not for the right purpose of the Parah Adumah. Eina metama begadim. That's it. That throws off the whole thing. Anybody involved in it doesn't become impure with the clothes. Eira psul b'hazayasa, if the sprinkling became disqualified. For example, somebody did work while engaged with the sprinkling. So here, the Rambam says it doesn't disqualify it retroactively. Anybody who was involved in it before it became disqualified does transmit impurity to his clothes and whatever else he touches while he's touching the Parah Adumah. But after the disqualification, no, at this point it's over. It's not a Parah Adumah anymore. So whoever's involved in it doesn't transmit impurity to garments or other utensils. Halacha Dalet, until when? Yeah, and Halacha Aleph we said, mitchila va'ad soif. Anybody involved in Parah Adumah from beginning to end. What's the end? The end is, over here says that Rambam, hishlim lichnois es efra. Once you finish gathering in the ash, hamisasik ba'achar kain. Anybody involved afterwards, bechilu ka'efer, in dividing the ash. Yeah, they put it in 3 places. Part of it was left on the mountain, part of it was in the chel, part of it was where the Kohanim and Levim used to stand watch. So whoever's dividing up the ash, or putting it away, and so to somebody that touches it, tahar, all these people are pure. And the commentators say this last thing, is true even before. Not only after the ash, even before you gather in the ashes. If you just touch it, you're pure. The loy ha-para bilvad, and here the Rambam again extends it. Not just the Parah Adumah has this law, ela kol hachatois hanisrafais, all sin offerings that had to be burnt. Mina parim mina seirim, the bulls and the goats. The Rambam is referring to the bull of the high priest on Yom Kippur. The goat also of the high priest was burnt. The bull that was brought by the court when they made a mistake, erroneous ruling. We had a whole set of laws on that in the last book. Also the goat for Avodah Zarah. They have to be burnt. They're not offered in the Mizbeach. They're burnt outside Yerushalayim. So over there too, Hasurfam mitame begadim b'shas reifasai. Anybody that's involved in burning them makes his clothing impure while he's burning it. Ad sheyei asu efer, until they become ash. Notice the difference. Parah Adumah, till you finish gathering the ash. Because Torah makes a clear emphasis on gathering the ash. Anything else, once they become ash, you're good. Because by the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur, what does it say clearly in the Torah? Or yechabes begadav, whoever is burning them has to wash his clothes. And we just said that expression means that anything you're touching while you're touching the sacrificial service that you're doing makes it impure. We learn from tradition. From Moshe Rabbeinu on Mount Sinai, Shezeh binyan av. This is what's called the building of a father. It basically means like
so when we said in Rabbi Ishmael binyan av, he made
this is it exactly. Yes, wow. Binyan av means like a father rule, a guiding principle that you learn from here to everywhere else. Any sacrifice that's burnt, they will transmit impurity to clothing till they become ash. Same thing as the cow. When do we say this? If nothing disqualifying happened to them. And they were burnt as properly in this area outside Jerusalem called the Beis Hadeshen, the ash place. Maybe here's a better picture. No, whatever, same point. Outside Yerushalayim, they used to burn these things. But if they became disqualified in the temple courtyard, in which case, nisrafim sham kipsulei hamukdashin, they have to be burned there in the courtyard, like any other disqualified sacrifice. The serfan tahar, the person that burns them is actually pure because they weren't burnt like their mitzvahs. And so too, hamisasik bahen mishei asu efer, anybody involved in them after they become ash, einay mitame begadim, doesn't transmit impurity. Why? Commentaries say, look over here. It says v'hasoyreif oisam, person who burns them. As long as they're still called them, a bull and a goat, as long as you can still see the form of bull and goat, they make you impure. But once they're ash, you can't see the form of the animal anymore, so you're good. The ezehu soyref, what qualifies as burning? Zeha misayeya bisreifa, anybody helping with the burning. Kigoyin hamehapich babasar, like somebody who's flipping the meat. V'hamashlich eitzim, anybody adding fuel. V'hamehapich ba'esh, turning the fire. V'hachoiseg gechalim kedesh tivar ha'esh, or you're stoking the coals so that the fire can get bigger. V'chayetze bahen, anything like that. Basically, once the fire is going, but before the fire starts, aval hamatzi so'ur, the person who actually kindles the flame, the hamisaderes hamaracha, or sets up the wood pile, tahir is actually pure. Now, what do you have the next word? Kach or v'chein? V'chein. Oh, very good. So in my Rambam I have the word kach lamdu, but it should be v'chein. It's another rule. V'chein lamdu mipi ashmua, they also learn from tradition another halacha about this. Shahanoisei parim musidim hanisrafim, that the person who carries, you see they used to carry them over here, I don't know if you see it clearly, these guys carrying it up, maybe this is better here. These guys, they actually carried it from the Beis HaMikdash to the ash, the burning place. So whoever carries the bulls and goats that are meant to be burnt, to take them out to the ash area to burn them, he becomes impure, his clothing becomes impure by biblical law, as long as he's involved in walking them. He has no part in burning them, he's simply a carrier, he's a transporter. He becomes tameh. V'ton tvila v'hadav shemesh, he requires mikvah, waiting till sunset. This law doesn't apply to the Parah Adumah, because the Parah Adumah service only begins once it gets to the other side, to the mountain. There's no mitzvah of walking it. It's a technical thing. But here, where there's a mitzvah to walk it, so it becomes part of the service and you make your clothing impure. Kimai, like we find elsewhere. Another guy who has a mitzvah of walking something and becomes impure. Remember this guy? And Yom Kippur, the person who walks the goat that's going to be thrown off the cliff, he transmits impurity to every clothing, every utensil that he touches, bekelim sha'alav, all the clothing that's on him, as long as he's involved with sending off the goat. Shenemar, as it says clearly also in the Yom Kippur service.
The minute he released the goat.
Oh, 1 second. Yeah, very good, very good.
Okay.
The person who sends off the goat to Azazel washes his clothes. Oh, now, that was just to show that even while you're walking it, you become impure. But now let's return to the actual bulls and goats that are burnt. At what point do they become impure? When they're carrying them. When they go out with them, with the bulls and the goats, outside the wall of the temple courtyard. Once they go out of the wall with the cow and the goat, they become impure. What if they're carrying them on poles, like over here, as they used to do? And only the first guys in the front are out of the wall, but the back guys are not. So whoever's outside, as long as the bull and the goat are outside as well, they transmit impurity to their clothes. The ones who didn't go out yet, it's basically the wall of the Azara is the cutoff point. If you've passed the wall, you're in Tumah. If you haven't passed the wall, you're not in Tumah. Yatsu v'chazru la'azara. Let's say they went out and then they went back in. They forgot something or whatever. Haneisin ba'azara toher ad sheyetze bohen. Whoever is still inside the temple courtyard is pure. It's only once you go out. Hoya aimid chutz la'azara. What if the Kohen was outside? You know those guys are always like pulling everyone to hurry up. He's the one guy standing outside. He's trying to pull them out by the sticks after they went back in. So now, since they were already outside at one point, and he's pulling them and he's outside also, who's fake tummy. Now it's a doubt whether he's tummy or not. We're not sure. Halacha vav. What about the guy, the Kohen, sending off the goat? When does he become impure? He only once he leaves the wall of Yerushalayim, not the wall of the Azara. Ad sha'as dechiyase la'azazel, until this moment, until he actually pushes it off the mountain. Aval achar shedachahu, but after he pushes it off, im naga bekelim ubivgadim, if he touches utensils or clothing, tohirim, they're pure. It's like after he's separated from a source of impurity. By the way, who is im naga? The simple meaning is if the mishaleach, the sender himself, touches something. There are other opinions that say that it's talking about somebody else. If somebody else who had touched the goat touches something else, after the time that it was pushed off, it's pure, but the simple meaning is the first way, that it's talking about the person himself. The commentaries also add that if the person, for whatever reason, got sick, and we saw it in the laws of Yom Kippur, that he can stop to rest here at these sukkahs over here to eat if he was very weak, if he passes off his agency to somebody else, whatever he'll touch also is no longer impure because he's done with his service. But because it was not common, the Kohen typically who merited to take the goat took it all the way, so the Rambam doesn't mention it. Halacha Zayin, another law that applies to the bull and the goat. Hanegea beparim ubesidim hanisrafin atzma. Same way when it came to the cow, the Parah Adumah, touching it is not a problem. It's being involved in the work. So somebody who touches the bull and the goat while they're walking outside, afilu achar sheyatzu, even after they left the wall of the Azara, bein adam, bein kelim, bein oichlin, bein mashkin, hakol tar. People, utensils, food, drink, it's all pure. V'cheinim nagu, b'soyer ha-mishtaleach atzmai, bizman hilachasr, also if they touch the actual goat. The goat being sent to the Azazel, if they touch it while it's being walked, to hide in they're pure. She'ein elu mitamin ela misasik bahen bilvad. That's the whole rule of today's chapter. The person involved in the work, he's the one who becomes impure. Shenemar v'haseiref oisa yechabes begadav. The person who burns it has to wash his clothes. Aval hanegeya tahar. Just touching is pure.